The Brave Salmon. In a pristine river nestled deep in the mountains, there lived a brave and determined salmon. She was a beautiful creature, with shimmering scales and a strong, sleek body. Each year, when the spring thaw came, she would begin her long journey upstream to lay her eggs in the same spot where she had been born. As she swam, she encountered many challenges. The water was swift and the rocks were slippery, but the salmon was determined to reach her destination. She knew that she had a crucial role to play in the circle of life, and nothing could stop her from completing her mission. Despite the danger of hungry bears and other predators lurking nearby, the salmon persevered. She swam with all her might, sometimes leaping high out of the water to avoid obstacles. As she swam, she grew stronger and more determined with each passing day. The brave salmon swam against the current, determined to reach its destination. As it swam, it saw other fish swimming in the opposite direction, downstream towards the ocean. Some of them looked tired and weak, but the salmon didn't let that discourage it. It knew that it had a job to do, and it was determined to do it no matter what. As it swam, the salmon saw a group of fishermen on the riverbank. They were casting their lines, hoping to catch a fish for dinner. The salmon knew it had to be careful, as it didn't want to end up on someone's plate. It swam past the fishermen as quickly and quietly as it could, and soon left them behind. The salmon swam against the current, feeling the strength of the river pushing against it. It had been swimming for days, and its journey was far from over. But the salmon was determined to reach its destination. It had to lay its eggs in the gravel bed of the river, so that the next generation of salmon could be born. As the salmon swam, it encountered a school of smaller fish. They swam alongside the salmon, admiring its bravery and determination. "You're so brave, Mr. Salmon," said one of the smaller fish. "I could never swim upstream like you do." The salmon smiled. "It's not easy," it said. "But it's necessary. If I don't lay my eggs, there won't be any new salmon to swim upstream next year." The smaller fish looked at the salmon with respect. They realized that the salmon's journey was not just about bravery, but also about responsibility. The salmon was doing something important for its species, and it was willing to risk everything to make sure it was done right. As the salmon continued to swim, it encountered a new obstacle, a dam. The salmon had never seen a dam before, and it didn't know how to get past it. But it refused to give up. The salmon swam back and forth along the edge of the dam, searching for a way to get over it. Finally, the salmon saw a small opening at the bottom of the dam. It was just big enough for the salmon to swim through, but it would be difficult. The salmon took a deep breath and swam toward the opening. It pushed its body through the narrow gap, feeling the rough concrete scrape against its skin. Finally, the salmon emerged on the other side of the dam. It was tired and sore, but it had made it through. The smaller fish cheered as the salmon swam away, continuing on its brave journey upstream. As the salmon continued to swim upstream, she encountered a new challenge. A group of seagulls had spotted her and were circling above, waiting for their chance to snatch her up for a meal. The salmon knew she had to be quick and swift to avoid being caught. She began to zigzag in the water, making it difficult for the seagulls to dive down and grab her. The salmon also splashed water with her tail to create a distraction and confuse the birds. She was determined to make it to her destination and lay her eggs. Finally, after a long and grueling journey, the salmon arrived at the perfect spot to lay her eggs. She used her tail to clear the area of debris and create a nest for her eggs. The salmon carefully laid her eggs and covered them with rocks to protect them from predators. Exhausted but proud of her accomplishment, the salmon rested in the water beside her nest. She knew that her work was not yet done, as she had to guard her eggs until they hatched. The salmon braced herself for another challenge and settled in for a long wait. As the salmon continued its journey upstream, it encountered a series of rapids that threatened to sweep it away. The water churned and roared, and the currents were so strong that it was difficult to keep swimming. But the salmon was determined to continue, and it summoned all its strength to push through. As it swam, the salmon noticed that some of the other fish in the river were struggling even more than it was. They were getting tossed around in the rapids, and some of them had even given up and were floating helplessly downstream. The salmon felt a twinge of sadness for them, but it also felt a surge of pride and determination. It knew that it had to keep going, not just for itself, but for all the other fish who were counting on it to show them the way. So the salmon pushed on, even as the rapids grew more treacherous and the water became more turbulent. It leaped over rocks, dodged fallen branches, and fought against the rushing currents with all its might. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, it broke through the last of the rapids and found itself in calmer waters once again. As the salmon continued upstream, the water became increasingly shallow and the current grew stronger. The journey was getting harder, but the salmon knew that it had come too far to give up now. As it swam through a particularly rough patch of water, the salmon spotted a group of fishermen up ahead. They were casting their lines into the river, hoping to catch a fish for dinner. The salmon knew it had to be careful not to get caught on their hooks. The salmon observed the fishermen from a distance and noticed that they were using lures that resembled small fish. It swam cautiously, trying to avoid the hooks, but suddenly felt a sharp pain in its mouth. It had been caught on one of the lures. The salmon thrashed about, trying to free itself, but the hook was lodged deep in its mouth. The fishermen quickly reeled in their line, but the salmon refused to give up without a fight. It struggled and jumped, trying to break free, but the hook remained firmly in place. Eventually, the salmon grew tired and stopped struggling. It knew that it had been defeated by the fishermen and would likely end up as their dinner. As the fishermen pulled the salmon out of the water, the salmon closed its eyes and waited for the end. But then something unexpected happened. One of the fishermen noticed that the salmon had a tag attached to its fin. The tag indicated that the salmon was part of a research project aimed at understanding more about salmon migration patterns. The fisherman quickly removed the hook and released the salmon back into the water. The salmon was relieved to be free and continued its journey upstream, grateful for another chance at life. As the days went on, the journey became more and more difficult for the brave salmon. The water became shallower and the current stronger, making it harder to swim upstream. She encountered more and more obstacles, like rocks and fallen logs, that blocked her path. But she never gave up. One day, the salmon came across a giant waterfall. The water cascaded down in a thunderous roar, and the salmon knew that she had to find a way to make it up to the top. She tried to jump up the waterfall, but she wasn't strong enough to make it. She tried to swim around it, but the current was too strong. The salmon was about to give up hope when she noticed a small hole in the rocks beside the waterfall. She swam over to investigate and discovered that it was a small tunnel leading up to the top of the waterfall. It was a dangerous and narrow passage, but the salmon knew that it was her only chance to continue on her journey. With all her strength, she swam through the narrow tunnel, fighting against the powerful current and avoiding the sharp rocks that threatened to block her way. It was the most difficult and dangerous part of her journey, but the brave salmon didn't give up. Finally, she emerged at the top of the waterfall, exhausted but triumphant. She had made it through the most difficult part of her journey and was closer than ever to her goal. The salmon took a moment to rest and catch her breath, knowing that she still had a long way to go, but feeling a newfound sense of determination and courage. As the salmon continued its journey upstream, it faced even more challenges. The water became shallower and the current stronger, making it difficult to swim. The salmon's muscles ached, and it began to feel weaker. But the salmon didn't give up. It took short breaks, rested in calm pools, and kept swimming. One day, the salmon came across a huge waterfall. The water cascaded down the rocks, and the noise was deafening. The salmon had never seen anything like it. It looked impossible to swim up, but the salmon knew that it had come too far to turn back now. The salmon took a deep breath and swam as hard as it could towards the waterfall. It leaped into the air and tried to swim up the rushing water. The salmon's body strained, and its fins flapped frantically. It seemed as if it would be swept back down, but the salmon refused to give up. With one final burst of energy, the salmon propelled itself over the waterfall and onto the other side. It had made it. The salmon lay there, gasping for air, but feeling triumphant. It had conquered the biggest obstacle on its journey. From there on, the journey became slightly easier. The current wasn't as strong and the water wasn't as shallow. The salmon felt energized and determined to continue its journey. As the sun began to set, the salmon saw the calm pools that signaled the end of its journey. It swam with renewed energy towards the pools, and finally, it had made it. The salmon had reached its destination and it was time for it to lay its eggs. The salmon dug a shallow hole in the riverbed and laid its eggs. It had completed its mission, and it was time for the next generation of salmon to continue the journey. The salmon felt proud and fulfilled. It had overcome many obstacles, and it had done what it was born to do. As the days went by, the brave salmon continued its journey upstream. It faced many challenges, including strong currents and large rocks in its path, but it never gave up. It had come too far to turn back now. Finally, the salmon reached its destination, a small stream where it had been born. The journey had been long and difficult, but it was worth it. The salmon swam around the stream, searching for the perfect spot to lay its eggs. As it swam, the salmon suddenly felt a sharp pain in its side. It looked around and saw a hungry bear, ready to make the salmon its next meal. But the salmon didn't give up. It fought with all its might, flapping its tail and swimming as fast as it could. Just as the bear was about to catch the salmon, the current swept the fish away, and the bear was left empty-handed. The salmon breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that it had survived its journey and accomplished its goal. As the salmon laid its eggs, it reflected on its journey and the lessons it had learned. It knew that life was full of challenges, but with perseverance and courage, anything was possible. And so, the brave salmon passed on its legacy to the next generation, inspiring them to face their own challenges with determination and bravery. As the brave salmon swam up the final stretch of the river, it felt a surge of accomplishment and pride. It had overcome so many obstacles, faced so many challenges, and persevered through it all. Now, as it laid its eggs in the cool gravel bed of the river, it knew that its legacy would live on. The salmon looked up at the stars above, feeling grateful for the journey and the lessons it had learned. It knew that life was full of challenges, but it had the strength and courage to face them head-on. And as the salmon closed its eyes, it whispered a final thank you to the river and the world around it. And so, dear children, as you close your eyes tonight, remember the brave salmon and the lessons it taught us. Remember that life can be tough, but with perseverance and courage, we can overcome any obstacle. So go to sleep now, and let your dreams be filled with adventure and creativity. Good night.